find this out when you graduate and you start making money, that when the school calls, they're usually asking for money. And so I kind of dodged the call for a little bit, and then eventually I took it, and this woman says that she would take my money, of course, but she really wanted to come see me. So we had a get together, and basically she just asked for me to tell the story of what I did from the time I left Chico to how I got to where I am today. And so I told her the story, and she said, would you be willing to tell that story to our students? And I said, sure. Thinking that, if there's some little tidbit in there that would motivate or inspire you, that, it would be well worth it. So when I put this talk together, I was trying to figure out where do I start. And for me, what drives people, their core, their inspiration, that's kind of the most important thing. And for me, the fact of the matter is that I grew up in a situation where my family did not have a lot of money. And it only got worse when I was a sophomore when my parents got divorced. So we went from not having very much money to having no money. And I think I probably overcompensate and have overcompensated to make money and make that my drive, but that's kind of what pushed me. So I did catch a break. And the break happened when I was a junior in high school. I took a drafting class, and the teacher was a real taskmaster. He's one of those kind of ornery military types. There was no joking around, no fun, kind of a hardcore guy. And one day, he asked me to stay after class. And of course, I'm petrified because I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm pretty convinced I'm going to get in trouble for something. And he says to me, I understand that you're in a tough situation, and you probably could use a good job. Okay. He says, a high school friend of mine is now the city manager at Hollister. That's the town I grew up in. And periodically he will call and ask for candidates from the drafting class to come to work in the planning department. So here's his name and contact, I want you to go meet him. So the guy's name was Roger Grimsley, and I went down to the city hall, and we struck it off pretty quick, and I came to find out that he was the city manager, director of public works, and the city engineer. He's one of those academics that had, I think, 3 or 4 postgraduate degrees, and he was all about urban development and city planning and so forth, but just kind of a brainiac. But pretty quickly it became clear to me that he wanted to be a mentor. And so we would go out on surveys on the weekends and look at, putting in storm drains in the city streets. And so we worked together a lot, and he was a huge advocate of education. So, I always kind of thought I was going to go to college, but after, his mentoring, I think I would have been pretty embarrassed if I didn't go to college. The problem was I didn't have any money. So I went the junior college route. For all of you who have done that, it's not that much fun when you're in a community situation, and it's a pretty weird blend of folks. In contrast to the stories that I was hearing from my friends that went off to a 4-year that lived in the dorms and all that kind of thing. So I got through the first year, and I knew that I really wanted to go off to college, but I just didn't have the money. So I made a big decision, and it wasn't an easy one. That was I took a year off. And my fear was that I was going to start making money, and then I wouldn't go back to school. You get comfortable and that kind of thing. But during that year, I did all kinds of things to make money. I framed houses. I drove an 18-wheel semi. And then I took a job. This guy landed an opportunity to build a food processing plant in Watsonville. And the game plan that he put together is that there was an abandoned processing plant in Southern California that had conveyor lines and hoppers and all the equipment that you would need. And so he had struck a deal to kind of rob that abandoned equipment, take it out of that facility, and relocate it in Watsonville. So I was kind of handy. I knew how to weld and use a cutting torch. So I went down to Southern Cal and helped him kind of harvest all this equipment and then set it up in the new location in Watsonville. And we got to the point where all the motors and so forth needed to be wired. So we brought in an electrical contractor and some electricians. And I was watching them do their work, and of course everybody knows how much money those guys make. So I was kind of intrigued. And I just became enamored with the idea of electrical contracting, or being an electrician. And so in my mind, it was kind of a fallback that, if I didn't make it through school, I could always be an electrician. So I did make enough money, and it was time to start thinking about going to a 4-year. And I was dating a girl who had just got accepted into the University of Oregon architecture program. So I didn't have a preference for any particular university, and she wanted me to go up there with her, so I did. Her parents didn't know. So when they found out, they weren't too happy. But kind of the bottom line is that I did not get along with Oregon. I didn't like the weather, I didn't like the culture. It just wasn't a fit for me, and that relationship wasn't really going anywhere, so I decided to look elsewhere. I had a friend who was doing her master's at Chico State, and she said, why don't you swing by on your drive home for spring break and check out the campus? So I did, and it didn't hurt that she had 4 roommates that were gorgeous. So they gave us a tour and showed me a good time, and just walking around this place, I knew this was the right fit for me. So, and I know you can't do that today, but in 1982, I applied in the first part of summer, got accepted by August, and I knew I was coming. So over that same summer, I was playing softball, and I was at a tournament, and one of the guys that was playing in the tournament was a kind of an elementary school friend who was being recruited to come up to Chico to play football, back when Chico had a football team. And so we started talking, and one thing led to another, and we agreed to become roommates, which was really pretty cool because when you're a football player and you're new to the school, you have like instantaneous social network. And I kind of, was a hanger-oner to that group of people. And then we ended up in a really nice house at 15th and Broadway. It was big, and we recruited 5 roommates that were all on the football team. So it was really fun. The other very critical statistic that I can quote you about that time is that the rumor was the guy-girl ratio was 4 girls to 1 guy. So our odds were pretty good in those days. So we had a good time in college. Academically, with my eye towards, possibly getting involved with being an electrician or electrical contracting, and the fact that I knew I was, once I graduated, I wanted to be somewhat close to home, and living in Hollister, it's maybe 40 miles south of the Silicon Valley. I figured that it would be pretty wise to take some electronics courses, which I did, or electrical theory or digital theory. But I knew I didn't want to be an electrical engineer, so I started taking coursework in business, and it was broader. I think there was more ways you could go with it. So I do not have a minor in electrical engineering, but I kind of had a hobby and interest in it. Back in those days, there was no entrepreneur concentration, so you had marketing, finance, accounting, and management. And above those 4 concentrations, I chose marketing. So another thing that was fairly critical during that time is that I had always worked while I was going to school. And once I got to Chico and I really knew that I was going to finish, the idea of taking on student loans started to make sense to me. And the reason for doing that is that I wanted to have the ability to really hit school hard and not have to have my attention split with working. And I thought that, once you graduate, you're going to make pretty good money. Paying off that student loan is not going to be that hard compared to, a minimum wage job while you're going to class. So once I got the student loan money coming in, I became really a full-time student. But I had taken that year off, and I needed to kind of make up for the lost time. And I know you can't do that now, but back in those days, I took 23 units for 2 straight semesters just to kind of get through it. And it became like a job. I got here at 8 in the morning, I left at 5 o'clock at night. My grades were way better, I was more focused, and I got through it. So, I graduated, and I wasn't a great student. I did like a 3.1. I wasn't at the top of my class by any means. But one thing that happened near the end is I did take a marketing class, and the professor, near the end of the semester, kind of broke away from the book and just started talking about what it's going to be like in the real world. And he advocated that it might be wise for all of us to consider the idea of taking a sales position as early as you can in your career. And the reason is that when you're in sales, not only do you have to establish a relationship with your outside clients, but you also have to build relationships internal to your own company. So your credit department, you got to qualify your clients, make sure they can pay their bills. You got to make friends with people in shipping and receiving, so that your products or your orders go out on time. If you're selling a technical product, you got to get to know the engineers and understand all the nuances of what it is you're selling. So basically, you're touching everybody in the company, and it's what a great way to learn. Plus, it'll expose you to what they do and how they live their lives. And at some point, when you're trying to figure out where you're going to go with your career, you have kind of an intimate knowledge of all that. So when I went looking for a job, I was looking for a sales job. Unfortunately, in 1982, the economy wasn't great. Interest rates were 14%, so jobs were hard to come by. But I did land one, and it was a place called Wiley Labs. And Wiley Labs